Today we're going to be making this lumber rack.
Take two.
Today we're going to be making this lumber rack on the outside of my shop. Let me show you how I put it together. If you do any kind of DIY yourself, you'll quickly find out you're always in need of more and more storage, and it often feels you can never have enough. I recently picked up another load of wood from a seller on Marketplace who had listed all this wood as firewood. Now, yeah, I guess it could be firewood. However, as a DIYer, I see much more potential here than just fuel to stay warm. Plus, it's the start of summer. Who's really thinking about cozying up to a fireplace right now? I was able to get this full truckload for only 70 bucks, and I really think I stole it at that price. This side is all rough cut cedar timbers, while this side of the truck is all larch. Larch is a soft wood, but one of the hardest softwoods out there. I guess you could kind of compare it to something like maybe elm, and it's typically used for construction lumber, laminated beams, flooring, those types of things. Anyways, back to the build. I operate out of a fairly small shop, so I've decided to build the rack outside my shop, but still under the cover of my overhang. And I figure why not build it with some of the wood I just picked up. For the base, I ripped down 2 of the 8-foot larch 1x6s into halves and built a simple box frame, spacing my middle supports at 24-inch on center. The overhang on my shop is 22 inches, and this is what determined the width of the base. I'm going to treat the base like a deck, covering it with more of the same 8-foot 1x6s once I get the main horizontals upright and installed. The idea is to limit the amount of anchors I actually have to drill into the stucco finish to hold the rack in place. So starting with the base, I'm going to use the bottom edge of the stucco to act as a locking brace, keeping it flush to the concrete foundation. As you can see here, the box frame has quite a bit of twist to it, hence the description firewood, I guess. I'll try to eliminate the twist by driving stakes into the ground, then leveling the box and screwing it into the ground stakes. Now I can move on to the upright members. Using some of the cedar timbers I have on hand should make it look a little better. If this was in my shop, I wouldn't really care what it looks like, but it is outside, it is visible to the public, and I should probably try to make it as pleasing to the eye as possible. Here I'm measuring the depth of the box again and then transferring that measurement over to the cedar uprights. This will allow for a lower fastening point below the top level of the base platform. Using 2 more of the 8-foot 1x6s, I can space the cedar pieces evenly out and then screw them to the 1x6s, essentially creating the back wall support. I ended up pre-drilling and installing 3 2.5 by 1/2 inch lag bolts into the stucco wall, reluctantly. There is 1/2 inch plywood behind my stucco which helped to secure and tighten it to the wall, and as I mentioned before, I am trying to eliminate too many penetrations into the outside finish of the building. I think this should be enough to hold the rack when fully loaded. Most of the weight is considered a downward load and there shouldn't be too much pull off the wall. From here I'm just decking out the base platform with more 1x6s, making sure to leave a small gap between the boards to allow for any rain or moisture to escape. For the final deck board, all I ended up doing was marking out the cedar uprights on the 1x6 and then cutting them out using a jigsaw. Me being the professional videographer that I am, I cannot confirm nor deny that I pressed the record button for this part of the build. Nevertheless, here's how the top shelf looks when completed. For the top shelf brackets, I basically cut my 1x6s at 22 inches to match the width of the base and then cut them diagonally corner to corner. Then screwed them to the top section of the cedar uprights and finally attaching a top support plate that overlaps the brackets to keep everything solid. I'm planning on a total of 4 shelves for this lumber rack, and to find the exact spacing is really easy. Take the overall height from the top of the base platform to the top of the uprights and divide that number by 4. My overall height is 68.25. Divided by 4 is 17 inches. So now I can mark out and run a chalk line down all the uprights to lay out a total of 15 support shelf brackets. I came up with a few different bracket designs before settling on this one. This bracket seemed to be the sturdiest when constructed and attached to the upright supports. It's also the least complicated one. I need a total of 30 of the horizontal braces to make up the 15 shelf brackets, so I tried using up as much of the small scrap 1x6s as I could before moving on to some longer ones. All these pieces will be ripped down using the table saw to a total width of 2.25 inches. Now over to the miter saw to cut 30 pieces at 18 inches long. To finish off the outside edges, I just cut a 45-degree angle on each piece. The original design I built incorporated a cedar piece as the angled shelf bracket support. I've since decided to swap that out and just use the same 1x6 large material. The fastest way to get through any kind of batch cutting like this is just create one template and then rinse and repeat until all your cuts are done. The most time-consuming part of this build was anchoring and leveling all these bracket pieces. Ideally, it would have been so much easier if I had just built each bracket individually and then installed them. However, that wasn't really an option due to the inconsistencies in the thickness of the cedar beams. I found using a pin nailer super helpful to hold the pieces in place and level while I pre-drilled and screwed everything together. Also, the chalk lines we marked out earlier were a massive benefit to help ensure each bracket remained level and true to the corresponding one. Now I'm taking a guess as it sits right now. Each of the brackets should probably hold about 50 to 60 pounds, so that spread across 5 brackets per shelf should hold a minimum of 250 pounds per shelf, which is most likely more than enough for any of my needs. However, if we're going to build something, it's better to overbuild it than underbuild it. So by adding these front center uprights should at least double, maybe even triple our estimated load capacity. Of course, this exterior lumber rack wouldn't be complete without my wife stepping in to get a coat of waterproofing on it before I load it up. And I gotta say, she's looking pretty good. And yes, I'm talking about the lumber rack, among other things. I think it turned out really well. I don't suspect the neighbors will complain about it being an eyesore. And I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us on this build. Quick update before I leave you. As promised, here's an update on the previous video of our raised garden box build. We built this exactly 1 month ago today, and I'm absolutely blown away at the growth we've seen here. Was it worth it? 100% yes. Can't wait for this small but incredible harvest. I'll throw a link at the top if you haven't had a chance to check that build out. Until next time, keep on building.